Hi everyone, welcome to the Sip and Spin and a Tour de Fleece tutorial. In my glass is a lovely hibiscus lime sun tea, and today we're going to take a look at how to make confetti cake batter, bats, and Rolags just using one fiber, a blending board, and or a mini drum carder. Or a drum carder. I just have a mini one. This is my mini Luette, and actually it works pretty well for everything I need. So I started with the raw locks, and as you can see, they're really clean. So I just did a quick scour using Unicorn Power Scour in very, very hot tap water, cleaned the lanolin and the tips, and I was ready to go. While the locks were still wet, I prepared my dye bath. I used each of the colors of the rainbow, thanks to KoolAid, and quart-sized freezer bags. I put one package of KoolAid in each bag with some very hot water, the locks, and then I set it outside to let the sun do its job. The cool thing with KoolAid is when the water turns clear, you'll know that the fiber has absorbed all of the dye and the process is finished. I ended up with these beautiful, vibrant colors, and it was an incredibly safe way to try dyeing. So as you can see, I have my white cake batter base with the rainbow locks that I flick carded out. I have to admit, I felt a little bit like a mad scientist putting these all together as I was laying the strips of colored fiber down on the white fiber before I ran it through the drum carder. What I realized as I was running it through, because Cotswold is such a long locked fiber, remember it's considered an English long wool, I realized on the carder it was doing a beautiful job of blending the colors together, but while I was getting a rainbow, I wasn't getting that confetti, those pops of color. So I don't know if this was right or wrong, but I went ahead and tried it. I grabbed the locks and cut them down into little tiny smaller bits to give me, I basically made neps. I gave myself the little pops of color that you would traditionally expect to see in confetti cake batter. And then I ran the bat through again, so I've got the long strips of color as well as those little tiny pops of color. Now, the drum carder, being a drum carder, still separated out some of those locks into strips of color. It came a little bit closer though. I had pops here and there as well as the long streaks of color. And this was good, but then I thought, well, is there a way to get those pops to come out a little bit more? So I grabbed my blending board. This is a blending board that I made earlier this year using two bamboo cutting boards that I already had laying around the house, an inkle band that was too short to actually do anything with, so I cut it in half and it made perfect straps. I dremeled out the top of the board a little bit deeper so the channel was deeper so that back piece sat in much more securely, and I'm ready to go. Now, there's been a lot of debate as to whether or not it's more cost effective to make your own blending board or to buy your own blending board. You can find blending boards online for as low as $60, $65, which the carding cloth alone is about $60 to $65 or more depending upon what size you get. So if you've already got all of the supplies laying around and you want a very specifically sized blending board, then by all means, I would consider making one yourself. Otherwise, I would look into some of the options that are out there on Etsy and some of the Facebook resale pages. Chances are you're going to find exactly what you're looking for less money than making your own. Now, I also realized I made both of my blending boards, and the whole idea behind a blending board is to create these layers of fiber that are going to pull out and pop out as you're spinning. And on the first blending board that I made, I used carding cloth. Now, you can get the same results. However, there's a big difference between blending board cloth and carding cloth. Cost-wise, it's about the same, but as you can see, the paintbrush that I'm using, which is a really inexpensive one that I just picked up, is pushing the fiber down into the board easily, and it's pushing it all the way down to the back of the board, so I can build up my next layer. And I think that's probably the biggest difference that I discovered between carding cloth and blending board cloth. Carding cloth, I have to work a little bit harder to get the fibers down against the back of the board. So for this particular Rolag, I laid down my first layer of white, just like what I did with my drum carder, and then I put a layer of the warm fibers. I put in the reds, the oranges, and the yellows. So I have a layer of just the streaks of warm fiber. And then I'm going to lay down another layer of the white. And I realized that when you're working with a blending board, less is more. You can always build up additional layers, but you want it to be even. The idea is you want a Rolag that is an even consistency all the way throughout. So you don't want thick and thin spots. So there's all of my that's my warm color layer. Now I put down my cool color layer. And again, the challenge working with these locks is because they were so long, I was really getting these long, long lines of color. And another layer of white. And finally, I get to put in the little pops of color. And I think I liked how the blending board worked better for this project. A little bit more work, but I liked the confetti pieces better on the blending board. You'll notice I've been doing the show, or this particular segment, I'm doing just a little bit differently than how I usually do things because we've been having some technical difficulties here. And I'm going to argue that it's because Mercury is in retrograde. Whatever the reason, today's show is just a little bit different in order to compensate for some of those difficulties that we've been having. Darn Mercury. So when you're pulling it off, the Rolag off the blending board, you're sort of stretching the fibers out and blending a little bit more as you go. There are two ways to do this. You can either make a giant Rolag, just depending upon the size of your board, you might want to do that. This board is kind of right in the middle. I could make one, but I decided to go with two so I could have one to spin and then one as a sample. And I'm really glad that I went with two because it was much easier to spin And I realized that smaller Rolags actually blend a little bit better on the spinning wheel. So there's definitely something to be said for pulling two off instead of just doing a big giant one. Now, if you go back and look at last year's Tour de Fleece videos, I also did I'm using my other blending board. So if you want to see both of my blending boards, go ahead and go back to season 1, and that has my other board on it. And that's where I was just learning blending board techniques. And I pulled off a huge Rolag that was a little bit of a challenge to spin. And Cotswold's a little bit like working with cotton candy, which is another reason why I'm glad I went with 2. So again, spinning, fiber arts, you're pretty much always learning. And I am constantly learning new techniques. So there are my 2 cake batter confetti Rolags. And there they are compared to the bat. Now let's see how these spin up. The wheel that I'm using is my Kronsky Sonata. There it is on the wheel. And as you can see, I'm getting a little bit of that lock spinning kind of structure. Some of those confetti pieces are popping out, which is so exciting. So because this is a small sample, I decided to just go ahead and Andean ply it instead of putting it on my center pull ball and doing it that way. Andean plying is a way to essentially make a center pull ball using your hand. First, secure it around your pinky because that's your center pull. Wrap the yarn around the back of your wrist, across your palm, around the back of your middle finger, and then come down and go back around your wrist again. So essentially you're making, as I said, a center pull ball using your hand as your core. Across your palm, around your finger, around the back of your wrist, and repeat. And then when you're ready to ply, find both ends. And this is where it's a good idea to have that pinky end secured pretty well so you don't lose it. Slip it off your middle finger. And then go ahead and ply it just like you would a center pull ball. Zola was kind enough to offer her expertise as well. So as you're plying it, you're pulling it off your hand. And there is the Rolag spun up. This was a lot of fun. I would encourage you to go try and make confetti bats. Remember, the Tour de Fleece is all about challenging yourself. Go challenge yourself. Thanks so much for tuning in, and as always,